is on the program. Judge Jeanine, it's a pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Well, thanks. It's good to be with you.
Yes, ma'am. I am so glad that you wrote this book. I've been doing some research about it. And I imagine because we live in these interesting times, it was a pleasure to write about President Donald Trump. Is he an interesting man to write about?
Well, he certainly is. He's a man I've known for many decades. And he was a man who was a successful businessman. He was successful on television, and the press, the media loved him. Cameos in movies. They couldn't stop writing about him. And then he announced he was running for president. He became the devil incarnate. The left, from the time he took office, has been having a collective breakdown. They blew their collective gasket, and now they've been trying to take him out of office. And because I've been a prosecutor, a judge, and a DA for 30 years, you know, I know the crime business. I've been in it a long time, and I know a con when I see it. And what they did with this president and continue to do was they set up a fake investigation with a make-believe dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton, the opposing political party, started an investigation, and this president for 19 months has been under an investigation that has shown nothing connected to him, and, you know, they will not stop. It is part of the lying, speaking, liberal left that just won't quit, and that's why I wrote the book. I thought it was important, and I outlined all of this in the book.
I understand that, again, your book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, you do discuss Peter Strzok. But interesting, you wrote about him before his recent testimony before Congress. So I'm just curious, did his testimony surprise you, or did you pretty much have him pegged?
You know, I'm very impressed. You really did read the book. Yeah, I did. I think the book actually is almost prescient because I had not heard Peter Strzok, nor did anyone, you know, in general, the public here, until he testified last Thursday. The guy was smug, arrogant, condescending, defiant, unapologetic, all of the things that you would expect based on the emails with his lover, Lisa Page. But the interesting part of it all is he said, well, don't, you know, it's like one of those, don't believe your lying eyes. I said that the guy would destabilize the country. I said we'll have to stop him. And I talked about an insurance policy, which we now know is the Russia collusion in the event he was elected. But don't believe anything I said. It was late. It appears that his girlfriend, Lisa Page, now testifying behind closed doors, is taking him on with respect to what his intent was. And look, I've worked with FBI agents. You know, I've worked with police my whole life. I had an office with 50 law enforcement cops who worked with me. And I love law enforcement. I have tremendous respect. And the shame of this is that they have to hang their heads because people at the top of the FBI, McCabe, Comey, Strzok, you know, Wierbicki, Baker, all these guys were involved in an attempted coup. And, you know, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, but, man, they ripped those bandages off so that they could investigate this man and impeach him. And from the time Donald Trump got there was anything that he's done right to them. And I write in the book about all the good stuff. You know, not a single metric is worse under Donald Trump. The economy's never been better. ISIS caliphate is defeated. You know, there's deregulation. Businesses are being expanded. Tax reform. Americans have more money in their pockets now. I mean, and they hate the man. But, you know, anyone at the tip of the spear knows there's going to be pushback, but there isn't a better person to push back than Donald Trump.
That's for sure. And it seems like I was just saying before you came on, it seems like every time the deep state or the media you know, sets these traps for him, eventually they fall into their own nets. We're talking with Judge Jeanine Pirro, her new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. Now, you mentioned, you know, having offices next to some of these people throughout your career. Speaking of leakers, you talk about FBI Director, former
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts
and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Thanks so much for being with us today. My name is Paul. You have found the intersection of conservative ideas and reality where we are building a liberty machine. We want you to help us do that. One of the ways you can do that is to call us or text us 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. We got a great show for you. I want to talk a little bit about some national headlines here in just a moment. But before we get to that, let me just kind of give you a rundown of what we've got going for you today, all right? As I look at my my show board here, coming up on the show, we are going to talk a little bit more about this concept of China being a bigger threat than Russia. Not only did the FBI say it and the CIA said it, now we have a tech CEO saying the same thing. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. Arkansas's job reports, job numbers are in. The labor force participation rate numbers are in. But it also reveals a little bit of a skilled labor crisis, skilled labor shortfall. We'll give you that story as well. As Springdale, you have an American company being bought by a Chinese company, and that'll kind of play into what we've been talking about. There's an interesting article about the new Speaker of the House, Matthew Shepard, that made the Gazette over the weekend. At the top of the next hour, though, I don't know what to call this segment. I mean, I guess I'm going to call it ASA and the Plant Board Part 3. ASA and the Plant Board Part 3. That's right. The governor is out with his new recommendations for Arkansas's agricultural industry and the regulatory arm. I guess in summary, his plan is going to do nothing. I have the document from his website. He says his new transformation of the agricultural industry is going to do nothing. And I'll tell you why that statement is a little familiar to me. We'll talk about that. At the bottom of the hour, we've got State Representative Kim Hammer is going to talk about his race. You know, he's running for Senate as the Republican nominee there. He has a Democrat opponent. And, of course, State Representative Kim Hammer is running for in the district that State Senator Jeremy Hutchinson currently represents but decided not to seek re-election. And I think we now know for obvious reasons. Also, we're going to tell you a little bit more about carefully crafted language this hour as well. So stay tuned for all of that. Let's get to the headlines. Yesterday, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky tweeted out, I guess, a pleading to the President of the United States, asking the President to revoke the security clearance of ex-CIA Chief Brennan. Senator Rand Paul, this from Politico, on Monday, said that he is in a meeting or going to take a meeting with Donald Trump to ask the former CIA Director John Brennan to have his security clearance revoked. He tweeted this: is John Brennan monetizing his security clearance? Is John Brennan making millions of dollars divulging secrets to the mainstream media with his attacks on Donald Trump? Today, I will meet with the president and I will ask him to revoke John Brennan's security clearance. So he had the meeting. And Sarah Huckabee Sanders gets this question later in the day after the meeting takes place. Joe, go ahead and pull this up. Sarah Huckabee Sanders responds in a tweet, or it was, go ahead and play that video right there. And let's take a listen.
Senator Rand Paul today made a strong attempt to vitiate the credibility of former CIA Director John Brennan, saying that he's, and I quote, monetizing his security clearance and that it should be removed from him. He even called on the president to do this. Will the president consider Senator Paul's suggestion and call for the removal of former Director Brennan's security clearance?
Not only is the president looking to take away Brennan's security clearance, he's also looking into the clearances of Comey, Clapper, Hayden, Rice, and McCabe. The president is exploring the mechanisms to remove security clearance because they've politicized and in some cases monetized their public service and security clearances. Making baseless accusations of improper contact with Russia or being influenced by Russia against the president is extremely inappropriate, and the fact that people with security clearances are making these baseless charges provides inappropriate legitimacy to accusations with zero evidence.
Follow-up question to Steve first. When
you hear the scuttle there. Cue the mainstream media. Get ready today, nonstop. This is going to be. People are going to start. Well, you've already got. You had like Adam Schiff. He came out and he said, "This is what third world countries do." It's like, no, okay. I mean, even if you're on the left out there, you've got to understand that the Obama administration and the Trump administration are in stark contrast with one another. And the people that are working for the Trump administration, well, I mean, unless you're talking about the deep state, that's what this really is. This is an attempt to start to purge some of this deep state. Why do you keep your security clearance? I mean, for example, I understand why you keep it in case you have to be called back and advise the future president or because of something you did when you were serving the old president. I understand that, but Susan Rice still has her security clearance after what she did, after how she lied about Benghazi on national television, about a video that they basically had in a glass case with a hammer next to it ready to break open glass in case it was all ready to be served up as an excuse for some terror attack. That's the way I've always looked at it anyway. 9/11 at that. And we have four Americans that died there. I mean, it's incredible. Now then you have James Clapper, who openly lied to Congress. There has been no penalty for it. If you and I perjured ourselves, we would be in jail. James Clapper not in jail. James Clapper thinks he's above the law. No, this is certainly what we are seeing unfold. And I said this last week is now, to me, I don't even think it's not a disputed fact that the intelligence community in this country is not monolithic, in my opinion. To me, it seems that there are competing forces, if you will, with the intelligence community. And I know what the media told you about, the Helsinki summit and everything else, but there is something going on. Now, at the, I guess the most basic level here, what Senator Rand Paul said, what Sarah Huckabee Sanders said, is true. John Brennan, specifically, the former head of the CIA, who went on CNN, who is a talking head on CNN. That's what they mean when they say monetizing, have monetized your security clearance. So John Brennan is being paid. John Brennan is making money, and they're saying using his security clearance to essentially guide the coverage from the geniuses over at CNN. That's what they mean by that. Now, John Brennan went on CNN after Donald Trump was in Helsinki meeting with President Vladimir Putin, and said that Donald Trump was treasonous. Now, come on. Now, first of all, the fact is somebody has a lot to lose here. That's my first observation with James Comey, with Brennan, with the rest of them, but Brennan specifically. You know, if he is screaming treason from the head of state, the head of the United States meeting with another head of state, and you know the comments that he made or whatever that are treasonous, even if you disagree, like many people did, saying, well, you know, Russia did, you know, they were involved in meddling, but the collusion thing, you know, there's a difference between active collusion versus Russia doing what they always do, or any country doing what they always do. I mean, by the way, I mean, you know, with what's going on in Iran right now, do you think the United States government is trying to meddle in Iranian elections? I would assume we are right now. I would assume we're trying to provoke or support any dissidents in Iran that we can, especially after the president's tweets. I just wanted to point that out. I think that's something that we all need to realize. But even if you're one of these people that are like, okay, I had a problem with what Donald Trump did say in Helsinki, or I had a problem with what he didn't say in Helsinki, you and I both know it doesn't rise to the level of treason, right? Like, not even close. It was a press conference. There's nothing treasonous about what happened. You and I both know that, right? What does it say about the mental capacity or the mental stability of a guy like John Brennan that goes on, that this guy used to be the head of our intelligence, or the Central Intelligence Agency at least, that goes on CNN and calls a press conference treasonous? I mean, that guy has either a screw loose, or he is sensationalizing something, or he is, got a lot to lose. I think he's got a lot to lose. Because if you really look at what has happened since the election of President Donald Trump, and you look at the FISA warrant that they got based on evidence with that dossier paid for by the Democrat Party, Hillary Clinton and the Democrats essentially paid for a FISA warrant. I mean, if you eliminate some of the steps in between, the court was misled. It's obvious the court was misled. When you look at everything that happened, you can make a logical conclusion that the Russia investigation, the Robert Mueller special counsel investigation, has been in an effort to cover up what John Brennan, James Clapper, Susan Rice, who did the unmasking, and the rest of them did with their, their top secret security clearances. Yeah, that's right, their top secret security clearances that now Sarah Huckabee Sanders is saying the president is looking into revoking. And by the way, as far as James Comey goes, the guy who leaked, not to one but to two people, right after he was fired, and he admitted as such, he admitted that yes, he did it. He leaked classified material. Shouldn't that guy not have a top secret security clearance anymore? You know, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Now, my next question is, if you have a top secret security clearance, but you're not able to, let's say, walk up to the White House and knock on the front door anymore. If you have a top secret security clearance, but you're not able to, knock on the front door of Langley, or knock on the, the front door of the NSA or whatever and say, hey, what do you got? What are you guys doing today? But you still have that security clearance. I'm curious, is there anywhere else that we don't know about that these people still have access to? That question, the answer to that question is for another time. You're listening to Conduit News. We have Donald Trump once again taking decisive action, and the mainstream media today is going to go bananas. They are going to go ballistic because Donald Trump is, yes, absolutely taking, you call it punishing, or you call it standing up for, for the people that voted for him, saying, you know what, I'm tired of these talking heads. I'm tired of these former people whose policies were rejected by the American people, whose service was rejected by the American people. I'm sick and tired of it, and I'm going to revoke their security clearance. Good for President Donald Trump. I hope he does it. I can't wait. My only question would be, Why wasn't it done yesterday? Why do we have to get bogged down in the bureaucracy? Why can't you just say, nope, you're cut off. We're going to take a break. Don't go anywhere. Back in just a moment. Director James Comey, I understand you used to work, close to him. Your offices were right next to each other. And tell me about Cardinal Comey. Tell me about this name, Cardinal Comey. What does that mean?
Well, I knew James Comey. I was the elected DA in Westchester County. He was United States Attorney in the Southern District at the same time. And our offices were next to each other. And, I liked the guy. I thought he was smart. He was certainly charismatic. He understood the law. And but then he went to the FBI, and I got to tell you, he drifted. Or I should say he went to Washington and he drifted. Because the fake investigation that he carried on, knowing what he knew as a prosecutor, with Hillary Clinton, no grand jury, no subpoenas, no search warrants, all the while she destroys evidence, sleep beds, hammers iPhones, and then makes up this investigation about Donald Trump. I mean, they call him in the FBI behind his back Cardinal Comey. I think the FBI is right from the FBI because he's got this holier than thou. I know everything, and now.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal. Ethics. Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody. Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, here we go, folks. Welcome back. There was, between the years here in Arkansas, 2013 and 2015, there was an amazing grassroots effort to educate Republicans and conservatives in the state of Arkansas between 2013 and 2015. That effort successfully destroyed the narrative of big government progressive Republicans that were claiming, number one, that their version of Medicaid expansion in Arkansas was not Medicaid expansion. They called it the private option, and they said it wasn't Obamacare, when in fact it was Obamacare. There was a grassroots effort from that amount of time to educate the people of Arkansas educating them, saying, no, the private option is Obamacare. Republicans have sold us out. Now, we're now figuring out how far the sellout went. I think you're seeing how much money was actually involved in this whole Medicaid mafia and the amount of money that they were divvying up, making, financial niches for themselves. So that happened. I just want you to understand that happened. And the people, through a grassroots movement, became educated, and they figured out that these Republicans, some of them, had betrayed their principles. And what did the governor do? Okay. The governor changed the name of the program, and here we are today. Changed it from the private option, which was successfully, it was an educational effort to try to get people to understand what the program was. The governor comes in, changes the name to Arkansas Works, and here we are today. The reason I say that is because I don't want to discount the advantages and the successes of educating people as to what a particular policy is, what a particular policy isn't, what is good about it, what is bad about it. And that is why, for the last almost 2 weeks now, I have been asking the question, is Arkansas's economic development policy good? Now, I think it's bad. I disagree with the government taking taxpayer dollars and giving it to private businesses. But I don't know if that's going away anytime soon. We can continue this educational effort, and we can try to change the state. But I would like to just digress from that point, that overall critique, and I would like to say, if we're going to do it, let's not give our money to companies that are owned by the communist Chinese government. Let's not do that. Anybody with me on this? Now, not only has the CIA and the FBI come out and said China is the biggest threat, and yet everybody's freaking out over Russia, we now have tech CEOs, and one in particular, saying that China's a real cyber threat. Not Russia, that China is the cyber threat. Look at this article from Christina Wong. Americans are in a war with China, just not one involving bombs. Jim Phillips, the chairman and CEO of NanoMech, said on Friday's edition of SiriusXM's Breitbart News Tonight with Rebecca Mansour and guest host Rick Manning of Americans for Limited Government. Quote, "We've got to wake up to the fact that we're in a war. It's one of the biggest wars that's ever been fought, and it's cyber warfare. It's not dropping bombs. That's why people haven't noticed it." So people haven't noticed it. And that's what I would like to do. I would like to get people to notice it. And I would like for Arkansas to say, well, maybe we shouldn't give our taxpayer dollars to communist Chinese companies. The FBI has 50 investigations going on in every state in the country, economic investigations, and the Chinese are involved in some capacity in all 50 of them, according to the FBI, according to Christopher Wray, the current FBI director. So you tell me. We're going to continue covering this. I'm going to tell you here in just a minute why we are making these deals with China. And it has to do with the potential for a success rate, meaning you have the announcement, you have the success in this case, though, is not actual jobs created. The success is just the deal actually going through and them coming here and building a factory or revitalizing a factory. That's the definition of success from the government standpoint. I'll tell you why they think China is a good fit here in just a moment. Don't go anywhere.
Quoting the Psalms and the Bible. Give me a break. You lied before Congress. Donald Trump didn't do anything until he fired you. He wasn't under investigation until he fired you. And you're a leaker. You've admitted you're a leaker. I mean, I could go on, but you got to get my book. Lifers, Leakers, and Liberals.
Yeah, and it's available now, folks. So we've thrown the Amazon page up on the screen for those of you who are watching as instead of listening. Now, 3 days. I'd love to get your opinion, Judge Janine, on the recent news here. 3 days before President Trump and President Putin were scheduled to meet in Helsinki, you had the announcement of the 12 Russians being indicted. Now, to me, it seemed that there were some trying to stop this diplomacy or attempt at diplomacy from ever happening. And if it was going to happen, they were going to make it really, really difficult and give the media all of the fodder they needed to try to paint this concept of collusion. I mean, do you think it's a coincidence that Mueller announced those indictments 3 days before the Helsinki meeting?
I like you. No, it's no coincidence. Of course, they decided to say we're indicting 12 Russians. Well, if you recall, they indicted 13 a few months back, having nothing to do with Donald Trump or collusion. They indicted a total of 25 Russians, or charged them, who will never be extradited, never be arrested, arraigned, tried, convicted, or sentenced. I mean, what is the point? It just keeps it in the news, and they're trying to get Donald Trump off his game. But as I say in the book, the man's a force of nature. He can walk into a den of lions and come out the winner. He has no fear. He takes incoming every day for the American people. And when you think about it, that guy could be in Scotland right now. He could have stayed in Scotland and kept playing golf. But he doesn't. He does it for us. And I'm honestly sick and tired of the attempt to destroy this man. I get politics. I've run for office 5 times, PA, and a county judge and all that. But this is beyond the pale. They're calling for treason, sedition, because, he didn't take Putin out on stage when in truth, no one has had more severe sanctions on Russia. We're arming the Ukrainians against the Russians. Barack Obama stood and watched while the Russians annexed Crimea, and right now, what we're doing with Crimea is we're helping them to be able to, defend themselves. And the other piece on the Russia piece is that we got mass sanctions because of Crimea. We killed hundreds of Russians.
All right, welcome back to the program. All right, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more about this, what I think is a misguided economic policy, giving our money to the Chinese. We're going to talk about that. Coming up at the top of the next hour, though, I want to talk about Asa Hutchinson's Plant Board Reform Part 3. This would be the third time the governor has attempted to reform the plant board or the agricultural department. This will be the third time he's attempted it. There was a bill in 2017 that failed. There was an attempt to get a bill put on the special session that did not get put on the special session this year as well. So this will be number 3, and they're getting out ahead of it. I mean, it's July. They're not going to try to do this until January of next year, so they're trying to get out ahead of this with messaging. And we'll read what the governor's message is coming up at the top of the hour when it comes to agriculture in Arkansas. Also, carefully crafted language. Want to talk about that. I'm reminded of Senator Trent Gardner and his op-ed trying to get the people of Arkansas to vote yes on Issue 1, the bad tort reform bill. I'll dissect some carefully crafted language. I got a feeling there'll be some carefully crafted language in that segment on farming, though, too. What do you want to bet? And then at the bottom of the next hour, State Representative Kim Hammer will be on to talk about his race for the state Senate. So, why is it that – do we have some technical problems, Joe? Oh, well. That's not good. Huh. So, well, maybe will tab work or something? I don't know. Joe's, I guess the mouse has failed here. It's okay. Just leave just leave it up for now, and let's see if it'll correct itself. Don't worry about articles on the screen. For those of you watching at facebook.com/Conduit News, you're just going to have to deal with it for now. So we're having some technical difficulties here. So there was the reason that in Arkansas, in my opinion, they believe that giving taxpayer dollars to Chinese companies is the best thing to do is because they are a willing participant, meaning they're going to show up with bells on. They're especially going to show up with bells on and make sure the deal gets started. And they, because they are agents of the Communist Chinese. I mean, think about it for a second. If it's like let's say worst case scenario, it is in fact James Bond level stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like where all of the companies in China, when they go out and they have plants or they have factories in other countries, that they are all expected to spy on the country they're in and report back. Let's assume that is that's the case. Now, I don't think it's that far-fetched. But, maybe there's some that don't. Maybe there's some that are just out to make money or be capitalists or whatever. I don't know. Have a weird sort of like it's a capitalist economic society, but it's a communist political society. I don't even see how the two can work together. I really don't. It's strange. So, the reason they think China is a good fit is because they're willing participants. I mean, if you assume what I just said is true, then of course they're going to want to do these deals. So they're going to act kind of hard to get about government subsidizing them or whatever, but they're going to be here. They're going to be in Arkansas. They're going to be somewhere in America, right? They're going to be somewhere in America. Why is China a good fit? Well, because they don't want this to happen. Well, they don't want the North. Here it is, the Northwest Arkansas Democrat-Gazette headline by Nathan Owens. Firm scuttles plan to build $90 million wood pellet mill in Arkansas. This is back on July 14th. And notice it doesn't really mention in this article the subsidies that this plan got. Do you have the wood pellet one? There it is. Yeah, it's Zika Biomass. Zika Biomass LLC. Boy, they obviously came up with that name before the mosquito crisis. Zika Biomass LLC of Houston has scuttled its plan to build a $90 million wood pellet mill in Monticello. Zika reached a deal 4 years ago to build a facility that would support 52 jobs. After a recent meeting with Zika's legal counsel, the Monticello Economic Development Commission said the energy company will not be building a mill there after all. Zika's not going to be able to produce on their commitment, the commission's Benny Ryburn said in a Wednesday meeting. So what we agreed upon was this settlement. Okay, the commission approved the resolution on Wednesday. Zika has agreed to forfeit the land for the proposed mill to the Monticello Economic Development Commission. They're going to repay thousands of dollars spent on environmental and energy studies during the planning stages. So they've spent all this money on the environmental studies, on the planning phases. They bought the land because the University of Arkansas at Monticello sold 80.9 acres to Zika in 2014. The commission agreed to let the company use almost 30 acres of contiguous industrial park land for the site. The nearly 110 acres will now be owned by the commission. They're going to try to do this again. Like they're going to try to pitch this to somebody else. Yeah. So like American companies, here's what I say. American companies are kind of like I don't know, maybe a little more fickle. Maybe things can change. Maybe they change their minds. Maybe they don't want to put a plant in But 4 years ago, I bet there was a great press conference. 4 years ago, I bet there were politicians that showed up to this press conference in Monticello, and I bet they were all talking about how, we're going to get these jobs, and you're going to have these amazing jobs. 52 of them at some point in the next 4 years. Oh, wait, no, the deal's dead. You see, I think with China, if you bring China in here, like the governor's done, I think there's a much higher success rate, a much higher potential that the deal's actually going to go through, and they're going to start to, revitalize the factory or build a factory or whatever, because they have incentive to do so. According to the FBI, the CIA, and tech CEOs, they have incentive to do so. They have incentive to come here regardless. I think we need to understand that fact. Again, and I'm going to keep saying this, I disagree with economic incentives. I think the government should stop it. But that may not happen anytime soon. But I do think we need to ask the question, is the giving of our tax dollars to Chinese companies when we are at war with them, or a Cold War, we're in a trade war for sure. They're building in the South China Sea. They're building up their military. The CIA and FBI says they want to supplant the United States of America. Well, if that's the case, and they steal our intellectual property like crazy, if that is the case, why in the world would we be making deals with them? Is it consistent with the Make America Great Again agenda? I don't know. I mean, factories. I mean, I thought Trump was more about the American factories coming back here, not Chinese factories. Chinese owned. They're going to use our resources. We're going to give them our tax dollars, and we're going to make Chinese communist companies rich. I don't know. It seems a little weird. It seems exactly like Germany wanting America's protection in NATO, but they are controlled by Russia because they, like the president said, had the gas deal with Russia, where 60% of their gas is now coming from Russia. So Germany's controlled by Russia. Boy, that made them so mad. Don't you know, it just ate them up inside. They were so upset that Donald Trump was essentially trumping this, well, you might have that opinion, but you don't, if you see something, don't say something. Well, Donald Trump says, no, we're going to start talking about the hypocrisies that are going on in your little international, order, your little international status quo way of doing things. And it just really, he turned the tables on him. He turned the tables on him 2 weeks ago. So that is why I think they go for Chinese companies, because they know it's going to happen. And they know their little press conferences where they get all the political capital and the more uneducated people that just don't know anything about economics. They think, oh, the government's creating jobs for poor Arkansans, for poor rural Arkansas, and look at what they're finally doing. They're spending money to give us money, and folks, nothing could be further from the truth. You want to know why Arkansas is one of the most poor states in the country? It's because our government is too big. That's why. We spend $8,000 per person to run our government. The states around us spend $5,000. And people are going to say, well, we got to spend that much money on our government because we're so poor. I would disagree. I have a contention. My hypothesis is we are poor because we spend $8,000 a person. I think those states are richer than us because they spend $5,000. That's what I think. The number 870-275-9799. Speaking of China, here in the Gazette, back on July 20th, we had the announcement that a Chinese air conditioning maker has bought a Springdale firm. Production in-state will avoid tariffs. So, what does this mean? Well, it means that if there's any manufacturers in the Springdale area currently, Arkansas businesses that are paying Arkansas taxes, it essentially means that the Chinese are going to hire away your skilled workforce. That's exactly what it means. And because we have a skilled labor crisis here in this country. Nathan Owens writes, as foreign competitors deal with U.S. tariffs on imported metals, a Chinese air conditioning manufacturer plans to keep its edge with help from a maker of copper and aluminum parts in Springdale. After months of planning, American Tubing International is being acquired by Sanhua Holdings, a global leader in the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning sectors. Quote, by far, this ownership is the best move that we've ever had, said Chuck Lewis, president of American Tubing. This takes us into a completely different plateau of business, being able to increase jobs here and be able to increase the product line that we have here. Neither company disclosed acquisition terms or the number of jobs impacted by this new deal. In attendance were elected officials, Governor Hutchinson, Tom Cotton, John Bozeman, and, get this, the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. After voters recently approved a nearly $200 million bond issue for the city, Springdale Mayor Doug Sprouse shared plans to invest $4 million to $5 million on road infrastructure improvements to open up traffic flow near the manufacturing site. Officials were hesitant to disclose job estimates Thursday morning, but assured that new jobs will be created in the region. Now, keep in mind, they assured you 4 years ago they said the same thing about Monticello and a wood pellet manufacturer. Quote, we do not know yet for sure, but we believe there's a potential for 100 to 150 jobs in the next 2 years. American Tubing employs 400 people. The Springdale company makes copper and aluminum components for air conditioners. But the Chinese company, Sanhua Holdings, makes products for the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning industry from those components. Sanhua's president, Zabao Zhang, said he admired the state's culture and looked forward to working with the employees of American Tubing. I'm very confident with the merging of the cultures being very successful. Interesting. For us, we just want to focus on what we are doing, Zhang said. What is our service to our customers in any situation? Anyway, so the bottom line is Chinese acquisition of companies in Arkansas is real. We continue to have a Chinese economic development strategy where we want Chinese businesses to come here. Now, I could be wrong, but I would love for someone to explain to me how this is not hypocritical if we are in a trade war, if we are in a military, it's like a silent Cold War. It's like no one even wants to talk about it. If we're, like tech CEOs say, we are in a cyber war with the Chinese. If, like the FBI says, that they have 50 investigations in all 50 states looking into China and their economic activity here and how everything's going back to Chinese companies. If, like the CIA says, that China is our biggest threat, more so than Russia, and they want to supplant the United States from our current position on the highest pedestal on the planet. Somebody tell me why we should be giving Arkansas tax dollars to Chinese communist companies. It's an honest question, and I don't think it's too much to ask of our officials to explain that one to us. If we were recruiting Russian companies the way we're recruiting Chinese companies, there would be political consequences for that. What's the difference? Somebody told me, and I don't know if this is true, but on Facebook I saw from our broadcast yesterday, they said, well, you see, Paul, they're anti-Russia because Russia is no longer Soviet. That the left and the leftist media used to apologize for the Soviet Union because they were Marxist secretly, and they went to these Marxist schools. And, of course, socialism and communism looks great on a chalkboard. They were taught that this is the way it should work, abilities versus needs, the phrase. So but now that the Soviet Union collapsed and it's just Russia, and Russia's not as, they don't have just as much freedom as we have, maybe in some contexts, but it's not the same. So we're anti-Russia. But China, though, well, I mean, come on, they're still living in the fruits and the benefits of Mao's Great Revolution. And they're still communists, and they're pure. They're pure. China is pure, like the Soviet Union was pure in their minds. I'm just speculating here. I thought this was an interesting theory, and so that's why it's now okay. Generally, we're told by the goalpost planters, those who say, now this is where you have to argue in this gap here in the window, that it's okay to do business with the Chinese for these reasons. And somebody's saying, well, maybe it's because they are considered a pure communist, and they mix a little capitalism in there, and so this is what it could be. It could be this. And honestly, if you believe in this baloney economic development policy where the government of Arkansas picks this Chinese company, we'll give you our tax dollars. They pick this Chinese company, we'll give you our tax dollars. That is exactly how a communist society works that tries to dabble in capitalism. You think you've got equality of opportunity over there? No. If you're poor, you're going to die poor over there more than likely. But if you're born rich, the government, the communist government, says you get to have a business. Oh, and you get to go to America. You get to go to a business. You get to have a business, and we want you to stay here in Beijing. You know what I'm saying? Like, the philosophies are consistent. That's why the Chinese, when it comes to the negotiating process, they end up getting all of these incentives because they're used to this way of doing business. They're used to picking winners and losers. They're used to the it's like a phantom cloak of capitalism, but in reality, they're just a massive communist country. Anyway, it's odd. It's hypocritical. Again, why not Russian companies? Well, because you can't do business with Russia, right? Unless you're the Clintons and you want to sell out Uranium One and you want to make a bunch of money and you want to launder money through Bill Clinton giving speeches because, he's just such a good, he gives amazing speeches. Everybody just wants to hear old Bill talk over in Russia or wherever they want to give him speeches. I mean, snooze fest, hello, boring. So, unless you're the Clintons, you can't do business with Russia. But if it's just, there's some sort of double standard here. I would like to figure out more about what it is specifically. Let me know what you think. 870-275-9799. This is Conduit News Radio. I'm Paul Harrell. Back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Syria, and then Obama just talked about the red line. We've expelled Russian from the U.S. We're increasing missile defense in the intel community. I mean, not what you say, it's what you do.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. It's almost like they wanted a boxing match up there in that press conference, and they didn't get it. And it's quite, you mentioned treason. They're now claiming that a diplomatic meeting was treason, and I'm like, well, that's a pretty low bar. I mean, if that's the bar you're going to set, what was the Hillary Clinton Uranium One debacle? I mean, wasn't that then treason?
Oh, yeah, the sale of 20% of all uranium to the Russians was when the Clinton Foundation gets a $145 million kickback. Bill gets a quick $500 cash for a 20-minute speech in Russia. You want to talk about collusion? How about we talk about the fact that the effort on the part of Russia to access our uranium, which was
exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
Some of your Facebook comments at facebook.com/Conduit News. Go there, like us. Also follow us. Randy on Facebook writes that bringing Chinese businesses in the USA is just bypassing the trade costs and giving the Chinese government more funds to buy more property and assets here. We are giving them the money to buy us without a shot being fired. Interesting. I want to know that's a logical conclusion, Randy, but what we need to know is, we have the director of the FBI, we have the CIA, a guy who is an analyst there, making these statements last week about, how China is the number one threat and everything else. Okay, well, if it is the number one threat, and it is like a Cold War, but like a silent Cold War, shouldn't we be talking about it more and asking our politicians if this is really the best move? Because if what you just said is true, you're exactly right. I mean, can you imagine during the actual Cold War with the Soviet Union if this type of stuff had been going on? So if we are moving in towards this kind of Cold War phase with China, if that is the case, then we've got to start talking about it so that doesn't happen. Tim on Facebook writes, I've said it before. There are no Chinese companies in the sense we are accustomed to thinking. Chinese companies are an extension of the Chinese government and the Communist Party. Chinese government completely controls their companies. I've got to assume that that's true as well. I mean, and it may not be overt at first, but it probably is. But just hear me out. Even if it's not overt, if you're a Chinese national, I mean, if you are a Chinese citizen and you're over here in America doing business and you are employed by a Chinese company, and the Chinese government approaches you, the military approaches you or whatever and says, hey, we need some information about this or intellectual this, property rights or something that's proprietary, whatever. Are they going to say no? The answer is, of course not. They're going to say yes. They're going to comply. They're going to do what that's got to, Tim, I would take it a step further. It's part of their job description. And you would have to assume that to be the case. I mean, I just think we've got to have this discussion. We're going to continue to have it. We've got to educate, though. We got to educate the public. Back to my initial point at the beginning of the broadcast, I think it was like midway through the broadcast, education is key. We've got to talk to the people and get the word out there. Do we really think this is a good economic philosophy and strategy moving forward if China is as big of a threat as some are now saying? Is it the same as Germany wanting protection from Russia, but they're doing business with Russia, and that's hypocritical, just like Donald Trump said 2 weeks ago at the NATO summit? I think it's very similar. Back in just a moment.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk 101.3 FM and 12:30 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
The book, it came out this week. It's called Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, The Case Against the Anti-Trump Conspiracy. And joining us on the phone, we have the author of that book, Judge Jeanine Pirro, is on the program. Judge Jeanine, it's a pleasure to have you on the program this morning.
Well, thanks. It's good to be with you.
Yes, ma'am. I am so glad that you wrote this book. I've been doing some research about it. And I imagine because we live in these interesting times, it was a pleasure to write about President Donald Trump. Is he an interesting man to write about?
Well, he certainly is. He's a man I've known for many decades. And he was a man who was a successful businessman. He was successful on television, and the press, the media loved him. Cameos in movies. They couldn't stop writing about him. And then he announced he was running for president. He became the devil incarnate. The left, from the time he took office, has been having a collective breakdown. They blew their collective gasket, and now they've been trying to take him out of office. And because I've been a prosecutor, a judge, and a DA for 30 years, you know, I know the crime business. I've been in it a long time, and I know a con when I see it. And what they did with this president and continue to do was they set up a fake investigation with a make-believe dossier paid for by Hillary Clinton, the opposing political party, started an investigation, and this president for 19 months has been under an investigation that has shown nothing connected to him, and, you know, they will not stop. It is part of the lying, speaking, liberal left that just won't quit, and that's why I wrote the book. I thought it was important, and I outlined all of this in the book.
I understand that, again, your book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals, you do discuss Peter Strzok. But interesting, you wrote about him before his recent testimony before Congress. So I'm just curious, did his testimony surprise you, or did you pretty much have him pegged?
You know, I'm very impressed you really did read the book. Yeah, I did. I think the book actually is almost prescient, because I had not heard Peter Strzok, nor did anyone, you know, in the general public here, until he testified last Thursday. The guy was smug, arrogant, condescending, defiant, unapologetic, all of the things that you would expect based on the emails with his lover, Lisa Page. But the interesting part of it all is he said, well, don't, you know, it's like one of those, don't believe your lying eyes. I said that the guy would destabilize the country. I said we'll have to stop him. And I talked about an insurance policy, which we now know is the Russia collusion in the event he was elected. But don't believe anything I said. It was late. It appears that his girlfriend, Lisa Page, now testifying behind closed doors, is taking him on with respect to what his intent was. And look, I've worked with FBI agents. You know, I've worked with police my whole life. I had an office with 50 law enforcement cops who worked with me. And I love law enforcement. I have tremendous respect. And the shame of this is that they have to hang their heads because people at the top of the FBI, McCabe, Comey, Strzok, you know, Witwicky, Baker, all these guys were involved in an attempted coup. And, you know, Lady Justice is supposed to be blind, but, man, they ripped those bandages off so that they could investigate this man and impeach him. And from the time Donald Trump got there, there was anything that he's done right to them. And I write in the book about all the good stuff. You know, not a single metric is worse under Donald Trump. The economy's never been better. ISIS caliphate is defeated. You know, there's deregulation. Businesses are being expanded. Tax reform. Americans have more money in their pockets now. I mean, and they hate the man. But, you know, anyone at the tip of the spear knows there's going to be pushback, but there isn't a better person to push back than Donald Trump.
That's for sure. And it seems like I was just saying before you came on, it seems like every time the deep state or the media you know, sets these traps for him, eventually they fall into their own nets. We're talking with Judge Jeanine Pirro, her new book, Liars, Leakers, and Liberals. Now, you mentioned, you know, having offices next to some of these people throughout your career. Speaking of leakers, you talk about FBI director, former director James Comey. I understand you used to work
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is hour number 2 of the program today, the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. My name is Paul. If you missed hour 1, never fear. Don't worry. Don't fret. You can get hour number 1 if you go and subscribe to the podcast over at iTunes, Conduit News Radio, over at your iTunes store or the SoundCloud app. You could also listen on your browser. Go to conduitnews.com, click on podcasts if you want the audio-only version. A lot of people do that on their phones. It eats up less data. You can also go to conduitnews.com and click on video archives, and you can get the show there, or go to our YouTube page. You can get the full show there. You see video as well as, obviously, what you're hearing now. Feel free. You can do all of that on the interwebs, as they say. The phone number this morning, as always, 870-275-9799. If you want to contribute to the program, you can sound off on the comment section at facebook.com/Conduit News. We're up and broadcasting there as well. This hour, want to talk a little bit about Arkansas agriculture. And we also, at the bottom of this hour, we want to welcome State Representative Kim Hammer, who will be on the program talking about his race for the Senate. He has a Democrat opponent, and he is running for this. It's an open seat because Senator Jeremy Hutchinson decided not to run for re-election for what we now know are obvious reasons. Let's start with the agriculture, though. A little background here. Back in 2017, Representative Dan Douglas tried to run a bill that would have consolidated the plant board, and it defeated. It was defeated because it was a power grab. The farmers found out about it. People in the ag industry found out about it, and they said that this was not the right move. And so it died. Didn't have enough votes to advance. This was in part due to an interview that was circulating that was on this program. It circulated thanks to the Delta Farm Press, thanks to some well-connected people in the agricultural industry that sent out the interview about this subject, and it got a lot of people educated on it. And I talked to several people that Conduit News' coverage of this particular story is what led to the bill's defeat. The governor was attempting to essentially consolidate the agency. There was some talk about whether or not the funding would now be stripped from the control of the plant board and be given to the governor. And, of course, this, at the time, you have to understand the optics here were very interesting. They were trying to raise taxes left and right in 2017, which led me to believe that we have a budget crisis. I think we still do, that nobody wants to talk about. And I think they were trying to grab every penny they could, and for their benefit, so they could spend it on whatever they want. I think the governor's office obviously wants more money to spend. I don't think that's a crazy concept. They want more money. Fast forward to this year, Senator Blake Johnson was the sponsor of a bill that some said was going to basically do the same thing. The Farm Bureau didn't like it. Farmers across the state didn't like what they were trying to do to the Arkansas State Plant Board. And Senator Blake Johnson came on this program after a weekend of phone calls and said he no longer supported the bill. But his bill, this is the key, Senator Blake Johnson said on this program that his bill didn't do anything, that it didn't do anything. He repeatedly said it didn't do anything, which, I mean, led me to ask the question, well, if it didn't do anything, then what is the bill? Why are we talking about a bill? Why do we even have this? So that was attempt number 2 that failed. So you have attempt number 1 in 2017, you have attempt number 2 in 2018, and the bills don't go anywhere. Fast forward to yesterday, Talk Business and Politics. Governor Asa Hutchinson presented to Farm Bureau members proposed Agri Department changes. Kim Souza with the story. He was the keynote speaker. The event took place in the governor's neck of the woods in Rogers. And he is now using, this is an interesting play. So do you remember when Asa had a primary opponent in Jan Morgan? And Asa went way to the right for him and took a lot of Jan Morgan's policy positions, right? Took a lot of Jan Morgan's policy positions as his own. And then he had an announcement. And that announcement was, we're going to transform government because government has ballooned and government has gotten so large. And we're going to shrink government, he said. So he said. Well, he's now using that effort that he launched during the primary to say this is why the agricultural department needs to change. Because it's about reforming or transforming government. So he had his, his typical speech where he talks about over the years, 42 departments reporting directly to him. In comparison, he said the much larger federal government has just 15 direct department reports to the commander-in-chief. So you see what he's doing here, okay? Call it carefully crafted language if you want. If you go over to his Twitter, Joe, go ahead and throw up the Twitter real quick. Here we go. The Arkansas Farm Bureau's 70th Annual Officers and Leaders Conference is off to a great start in Rogers this afternoon. I was delighted to discuss how our policies and priorities for this upcoming session will help strengthen our agriculture and farming communities. Okay? That's what he says. But let's actually look at the goal from the governor's website. The Office of Governor Asa Hutchinson Department of Agriculture Transformation Plan. Number 1. Here's the meat and potatoes of this segment, folks. If you hear anything, you need to hear this. Go ahead, Joe. Can you throw the other thing up there? Number 1. Under the governor's proposal, the regulatory functions of Arkansas agriculture would not change. Okay? All right. So there's no change. It's a proposal to transform, but there will be no change. Arkansas agricultural organizations will continue to appoint designated members of boards and commissions as is currently provided under Arkansas law. The Arkansas State Plant Board will continue to be an independent board. The Livestock and Poultry Commission and the Forestry Commission will continue to be independent commissions. Okay, all right. Number 2. Under the governor's proposal, special revenues would remain the same. Okay, that's interesting. So the first 2 points, the governor is telling you nothing will change here. That sounds familiar. Kind of sounds like Senator Blake Johnson's interview where he said, my bill didn't do anything. My bill didn't do nothing. It does nothing. It does nothing. Special revenue funds will continue to be used solely for the purposes for which they were collected in accordance with the law. So there's no change, okay? Number 3, under the governor's proposal, all employees of the State Plant Board, Livestock and Poultry Commission, and Forestry Commission would report to the Department of Agriculture and would implement the regulations of the independent board and commissions. Operating as one team will allow the Department of Agriculture to better serve the industry and citizens of the state. Now, okay, now, is it just me? Or does number 3 contradict number 1? How can you be an independent board but be part of one team? Seems that number 1 and number 3 contradict one another. Number 4, the governor says, under the governor's proposal, there would be no, he's not referring to himself in third person, there would be no change in the administration of the promotion of boards. Okay, so far we have 4 bullet points, and in 3 of the 4, the governor is telling us that his plan doesn't change these things. Sounds like he's sensitive. Sounds like he's definitely messaging a good 6 months before this thing's going to come to a vote next year. Under the governor's proposal, there would be no change in the administration of the promotion of boards. The Farm Bureau will continue its current role of administering all 6 promotion boards. The Beef Council, Catfish Promotion Board, Arkansas Corn and Grain, Sorghum Promotion, Arkansas Rice Research and Promotion, Arkansas Soybean Promotion, Arkansas Wheat Promotion. Now, point number 5. Under the governor's proposal, agriculture would be represented on the Pollution Control and Ecology Commission. The Secretary of Agriculture would become an additional and permanent member of the State Pollution Control and Ecology Commission. So there you have it. In one-page document, this is the government's transformation plan, where 3 of the 5 points says it doesn't do anything. It doesn't change anything. Now, folks, I don't know about you, but I've been following this administration for a while. I think I can read between the lines. I think you can read between the lines. I don't believe that what was proposed by Dan Douglas and the governor back in 2017 has been scrapped because it resurfaced a little bit in 2018, and I think it's coming back in a big way in 2019. And here's a preview. So it's part 3. It's ASA and the Plant Board, part 3. I had a few. This came to my attention last night. Farmers talk to me. A lot of people talk to me. Matter of fact, on one of the survey questions Conduit News was doing on Facebook, and one of those survey questions, they said, what topics would you like to hear about, listener? And one listener texted me a question. I saw this morning and said, I would like to hear about how Conduit News protects its sources. And I think that's interesting. Well, some people want to have anonymous conversations. Some people want to have confidential conversations, and we protect those sources just like any journalist would protect those sources. But I had a few people talk to me, and one in particular is very upset about this whole situation. This is all about, according to the governor, wanting to consolidate I would say it's about consolidating power into the executive branch, because the plant board is independent, and I think ASA believes they're too independent, and it has to do with dicamba. If you don't think Monsanto is behind some of the motivations here, I think we would be kidding ourselves. When it comes to dicamba, that's a huge issue. The plant board stepped up and did what the governor... I don't think the governor wanted dicamba banned because of Monsanto. And Monsanto's probably like, what do you mean you have a plant board? Arkansas is like, I think, one of the last states that has this kind of independent citizen-led commission. And I think the governor disagrees with it. I don't think he thinks these people have paid their dues in politics and they shouldn't have authority. That's what I personally think. And so that's why we have this situation. And I know it's a complex... Look, I'm not Mr. Regulatory Board. I'm not crazy about regulatory boards. I'm really not. I'm also not crazy about consolidating power. I've talked to farmers that said if they get their way, right now you might see the plant board once a year, or you need to comply with this or that once a year, but nobody ever actually comes on my property because they trust farmers. This is what I've heard. But if you actually give some of this regulatory authority or strip some of it with the Department of Ag, I'm going to have somebody on my property. They're going to be treating me like I'm a moron and I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to storing this or storing that chemical. And I think that's exactly what will happen. But this particular farmer says if Asa were serious about cutting money, he would do away with the $2 million budget, the Ag Department $2 million budget. But no, he wants to neuter the rulemaking process of the Arkansas State Plant Board so he can parlay any political favors he may need. This is what caught my attention. This was the initial communication between me and this person. Originally, the Department of Agriculture, according to this source, had a $150,000 budget. No politics. Now it's $2 million. And, of course, the people in positions of power, they put in their hand-picked people, and they are put in charge of the money. And there's a desire to have access to the money the Arkansas State Plant Board has across the crop promotion boards, the cash, that sort of thing. This person says, doing the exact opposite of conservative principles, expanding government and taking self-supporting agencies and robbing their coffers so they are beholden to the king for funding annually. Meaning, if he does this, the way they're interpreting it is that they're not going to be able to go against Monsanto if the governor wants them to go with Monsanto, because he just won't give them any money next year. That's the definition of consolidating power. So anyway, it's Asa and the Plant Board Part 2. Asa and the Plant Board Part 2. And that's probably going to be the title of this particular podcast. Hey, folks, coming up here in just a moment, we have State Representative Kim Hammer talking about his Senate race. You want to stay tuned for that. We really appreciate everybody listening. Tell me what you think about the plant board. Tell me about what you think about the governor's plan to transform agriculture in this state. You better be careful. You better not let look, I know there's already special interests in everything, but it just seems to me it's our biggest industry. It seems to me to be working fine. Not that there aren't temporary evils out there. There are temporary evils because man isn't perfect. There are no perfect man-made systems. There are systems that are better than other systems. But if agriculture is our biggest industry here in the state of Arkansas, or one of the biggest industries, you better be real careful and real sure you know what you're doing if you're going to mess with it. We got to take a break. It's Conduit News Radio. Back in just a close to him, your offices were right next to each other. And tell me about Cardinal Comey. Tell me about this name, Cardinal Comey. What does that mean?
Well, I knew James Comey. I was the elected DA in Westchester County. He was United States Attorney in the Southern District at the same time, and our offices were next to each other. And I liked the guy. I thought he was smart. He was certainly charismatic. He understood the law. And but then he went to the FBI, and I got to tell you, he drifted. Or I should say he went to Washington and he drifted. Because the fake investigation that he carried on, knowing what he knew as a prosecutor, with Hillary Clinton, no grand jury, no subpoenas, no search warrants, all the while she destroys evidence, reads hammers iPhones, and then makes up this investigation about Donald Trump. I mean, they call him in the FBI behind his back Cardinal Comey. I think that's the FBI.
Who's next to Zipline?
Me, and I'm really excited about this.
Sir, I'm sorry. The Zipline has a 350-pound weight limit, and frankly, I do not think it would be safe for you.
Oh, that's okay. I self-identify as 180 pounds, so it's cool.
Sir, that doesn't make any sense to me, and I'm afraid we can't let you ride the Zipline. You're too heavy. I'm sorry.
I can't believe this. I thought we had evolved as a society. I thought this was America, but I guess this is just my plight. First slavery, and now fat-shaming.
Sir, again, I'm really sorry.
You listen to me. If you don't let me ride, not only will I sue this company for discrimination, I will sue you for damages because right now my feelings are so hurt and I feel embarrassed because I'm holding up the line.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Watch it, mister.
Look, okay, I'm sorry. I just don't think it would be safe for you.
You don't understand. I self-identify as skinny. So you have to let me ride the zip line. The Constitution says so. I get to define my own reality.
Oh, you know, okay, fine, whatever. Ride the zip line. Mike, let this man ride the zip line.
Thank you. Now watch as my self-identity trumps your bigotry. See you on the other side, racist. Here I go! Doctor, thank goodness. What's the prognosis?
Sir, we've done everything we can, and you only have seconds to live.
No, you cannot say that. I do not self-identify as a dead person.
PHP Parody.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, we got State Representative Kim Hammer coming up at 7:33. Want to stay tuned to that. Tomorrow on the program, we'll be talking with the Patriots of X746's Mr. Chuck Clifton is back on the program. Also, you don't want to miss tomorrow's broadcast because we'll also be talking with Mr. Trevor Burrus. Trevor is a Cato Institute scholar. And we had, Elia Shapiro on yesterday. Matter of fact, Cato put that interview up on their website. Thought that was really nice of them. But we'll be talking with Trevor Burrus, another Cato fellow, about dark money and the new guidelines the federal government is now giving. It's going to be very interesting stuff. You're definitely going to want to stay tuned for that segment tomorrow. And then throughout the week, we've got a small business spotlight. On Friday, we also have Mr. David Ferguson coming on the program, going to talk about his article that critique the Attorney General's opinion on your Second Amendment gun rights, specifically enforcement law here in Arkansas. I have this text message. I thought this was interesting, that if the governor really wanted a smaller government in ag, the key would be to abolish the Department of Agriculture altogether. Somebody asked the question, why do we even need a Secretary of Agriculture here in Arkansas? $1.2 million budget just for the Department of Agriculture. Listen to this. Now, this is key. This is interesting. 1 million acres across the country, 1 million acres were damaged by dicamba again this year. The Arkansas State Plant Board, that went against the governor from what I can tell, appears to be the only state that got it right about the ban on Monsanto dicamba. Why do I suspect that if these reforms, quote, reforms, had gone through in 2017 like Asa and Dan Douglas wanted them to, there would have been no ban on dicamba? Why do I suspect that there would have been use of dicamba and Monsanto would come around with the cure, the seeds that are dicamba resistant? So it wouldn't matter if you have drift, because Monsanto would have the solution for it. I mean, this isn't low-hanging fruit stuff, is it, folks? You don't hear, this isn't low-hanging fruit issues here. This is pretty high up on the food chain that you're hearing this morning, and we hope we try to do it every morning. I appreciate all of your comments on Facebook. We're broadcasting live across stations, or on stations across Arkansas, as well as multiple social media platforms, YouTube, Facebook, live stream, conduitnews.com. Check us out at conduitnews.com. We have got to go to break. We'll be back with State Representative Kim Hammer.
The FBI, because he's got this holier than thou, I know everything. And now he's quoted the Psalms and the Bible. Give me a break. You lied before Congress. Donald Trump didn't do anything until he fired you. He wasn't under investigation until he fired you. And you're a leaker. You've admitted you're a leaker. I mean, I could go on, but you got to get my book. Leakers, leakers, and liberals.
Yeah, and it's available now, folks. So we've thrown the Amazon page up on the screen for those of you who are watching as instead of listening. Now, 3 days. I'd love to get your opinion, Judge Janine, on the recent news here. 3 days before President Trump and President Putin were scheduled to meet in Helsinki, you had the announcement of the 12 Russians being indicted. Now, to me, it seemed that there were some trying to stop this diplomacy or attempt at diplomacy from ever happening. And if it was going to happen, they were going to make it really, really difficult and give the media all of the fodder they needed to try to paint this concept of collusion. I mean, do you think it's a coincidence that Mueller announced those indictments 3 days before the Helsinki meeting?
I like you. No, it's no coincidence. Of course, they decided to say we're indicting 12 Russians. Well, if you recall, they indicted 13 a few months back, having nothing to do with Donald Trump or collusion. They indicted a total of 25 Russians, or charged them, who will never be extradited, never be arrested, arraigned, tried, convicted, or sentenced. I mean, what is the point? It just keeps it in the news, and they're trying to get Donald Trump off his game. But as I say in the book, the man's a force of nature. He can walk into a den of lions and come out the winner. He has no fear. He takes incoming every day for the American people. And when you think about it, that guy could be in Scotland right now. He could have stayed in Scotland and kept playing golf. But he doesn't. He does it for us. And I'm honestly sick and tired of the attempt to destroy this man. I get politics. I've run for office 5 times, PA, and a county judge and all that. But this is beyond the pale. They're calling for treason, sedition, because, he didn't take Putin out on stage when in truth, no one has had more severe sanctions on Russia. We're arming the Ukrainians against the Russians. Barack Obama stood and watched while the Russians annexed Crimea, and right now, what we're doing with Crimea is we're helping them to be able to, defend themselves. And the other piece on the Russia piece is that we've got mass sanctions.
Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, folks, thanks so much for being with us this morning. Good morning to you. We're kind of in the home stretch of the program, but I know many of you are the beginning of your day here, and we really appreciate it. Thanks for starting your morning with us. Welcome back to the program. We've got State Representative Kim Hammer is back with us. Kim, welcome to the program. Good morning to you.
Good morning. It's a beautiful morning.
It is. It is. Hey, I wanted to have you on and just kind of talk a little bit about, some of the issues of the day, but more specifically, you are running for the state Senate, and we want to make sure everybody knows that you are running for the Senate. You do have a Democrat opponent. What are some of the issues that are important to you in this race?
Number one, I think with regards to, and I know these are, sometimes have become cliches, but I think they're important phrases. The meaning you put behind the phrases are, demonstrated through the actions. But as far as, the government, state of Arkansas, being more efficient in the way in which we do business, whether that's looking at the, combining of services or the reorganization, such as, Governor Hutchinson is exploring and making sure that whatever reorg comes out that we, A, run it as efficiently as possible with the number of people that we have, and then B, take a look at the policies that are driving the decisions and kind of separate the things that we're doing just for the sake of doing them versus the things that are, actually necessary or directed by the federal government, and we, have to comply with it. That would, that's kind of one of the top things. Secondary would be to look at the financial resources of the state and see if we are managing our money as efficiently and as effectively as possible.
Do you think there's
I'm not sure.
Do you think there's room for improvement on that right now, managing our money better?
Oh yeah. In fact, I'm really not at liberty to say, but devising a plan, been having some meetings with individuals, and probably within the next 30 days going to reveal a concept that I hope he'll be introduced as a piece of legislation, but just in the process of refining it. But there is a way in which we can make our money work harder for us, and that's part of it. If you're not making the money you've got work harder for you, why should you ask for any more money? And do you really need to ask for any more money if you can make the money you've got work harder for you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think a lot of Arkansans, they're very aware of how much money we're giving to the state of Arkansas, for example. I mean, the state of Arkansas took a record amount of revenue from the people last year. And so, when there is maybe a year ago, there were some proposed tax increases. There was the idea of a gas tax increase and things like that. That failed. But if we're taking record revenue from the people, and yet we still don't seem to have money for highways, or we seem to have every year we're like, oh, where's the money for the matching rate going to come from? I think some Arkansans a lot of us are thinking, well, hang on, we're already giving you money to do these things, so maybe we're not spending the money that we're giving appropriately. What are your thoughts on that idea?
Well, if you're taking in record amounts, and the Treasury report is going to be coming out sometime the 1st of August, I think, as far as the what the earnings on the Treasury are. I think you throw that into the picture also. I do think it's time to hit the pause button and just say, okay, before we give out or expand or increase anything, can we take what we have and reduce what we're doing, kind of like I was saying a while ago, without the need to raise taxes or and taxes are just a necessity of life. Even Jesus paid his taxes. Okay, so he acknowledged that taxes are a part of life in order to fund and to run your government. I'm not anti-tax. What I am is anti-spending. And if you get your spending under control and you only provide the services that are essential, and that's a whole other turf war. Is everything we're doing actually essential, or is it just because somebody else isn't doing their job, and so we make it essential with no justification? That's kind of a third tier of a thing that I'm interested in working on, is identifying what is actually essential, because then we can start to cut back the justification to raise taxes. And I think that's where you win the battle, is cut back the justification for why taxes are asked for by eliminating the justification for what you're trying to get it for.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I think certainly that's a good avenue. I mean, every dollar that is spent, if it's in your sector, then it's essential. If it's in your wheelhouse, then of course you're going to argue that it's essential, and that's the problem that we have. I think that the best way to do this is to attempt to gauge, okay, what is the highest majority agree the function of government should be. And I for example, I know I keep going back to roads, but I'm thinking, I think most people would say, okay, yeah, this is a function of government that it benefits so many people, versus this program or that program that, benefits less people. And I think that's certainly kind of an economic triage, if you will, just a way of looking at this. You have I mentioned earlier, Democrat opponent. Her name is Melissa Fultz, I believe. And I was looking at some of the PACs that she's associated with that have, that are supporting her, like Women in Arkansas or something like that. And it seems to me, and I'm speculating here, but it kind of seems to me she's kind of jumped on board this, anti-Trump sentiment that you're seeing across the country, and maybe attempting to run on supposed outrage about what the president's doing. Of course, his poll numbers are up. The country loves him. People in Arkansas love him. But anyway, do you want to speak to that at all?
I I would just say one of the best things that my opponent can do is continue to come out against Trump, because I agree. I think that, hey, Trump is not perfect. He's got his baggage. He's like the rest of us. Let him without sin cast the first stone, okay? I get it. But I do believe, with having a little time in office now, personally, I really believe that God appointed Trump to the position that he's in, and I think he's made it evident by his actions. Not that God agrees with all of his actions. Don't get me wrong, and don't read into anything I'm saying. But what he has been able to do in the time that he's been able to be in office against the obstacles that have been put in his way is nothing less than supernatural, because he has achieved some great things. Of course, the media is what the media is. Just accept the fact that that's the way they're always going to be. They're not going to change.
Yeah.
If they change, they go out of business. So I think that if anyone that is running their campaign dependent upon people aligning with them because they dislike Trump, I think is a flaw in their political approach. And
well, especially in Arkansas,
I think that'll be a good thing.
Yeah, especially in Arkansas. Yeah. No. I just want to say I really applaud you for being honest with what you think and about President Trump in this manner, because I would agree with you in your sentiments there. It is amazing to me to see what he has accomplished in such a short amount of time, and the obstacles, and how he's tearing down I don't know, it's almost like the captive audience that America was with the media specifically. And I have been recently, Kim, I've reminded of Psalm 35. In Psalm 35, it actually talks about, it's a prayer from David, and is asking, like, his enemies actually fall into their own nets. The nets that they have laid for him, would they fall into their own nets? And it's a fascinating piece of scripture. And it, to me, in a lot of ways, I think we have seen that play out many times with the media or the deep state or whatever. There appear to be these nets that have been set, and the media keeps falling into their own traps that they're attempting to set for them. And it's you mentioned the word supernatural. I would be lying if I said that hasn't crossed my mind as a possibility.
Well, somebody was talking on the radio the other day, this is not a time to be passive. This is a time to identify yourself, take a stand. And it, in my opinion, in America's history, we've had some very times that have really pushed us to our limits as a nation, and have really started to rip the thread that's holding us together. I think this is one of those times, and it's not time to be weak. It's time to step up and be strong, and it's time to, above all time, look to God and, seek His wisdom, seek His guidance, because the only way that we're going to survive as a nation isn't going to be because of Donald Trump. It's going to be because we turn back to God, and those who align with His values, principles, teachings. I think those are the ones that God's going to bless, and those are the ones that are going to stand out among the darkness of the nation and give people something to look to and hope for.
We're talking with State Representative Kim Hammer. He is the current representative for District 28, but he's running. Joe, is it 30? Is it 33, Kim?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
33.
So Senate District 33. Now that is the district currently, or the seat currently occupied by Senator Jeremy Hutchison. He's not running for re-election. But I need to ask you, Kim. In preparing to go to the higher chamber, I know your colleagues in the House would disagree, and you may disagree that it's the higher chamber. But in preparing to go to the higher chamber, obviously, the elephant in the room here is the massive amounts of corruption that have been in the headlines, throughout the last year or so. We obviously have the Senate. They have proposed ethics rules and things like that, but we still have. We had a guilty plea the other day, last Thursday afternoon. So are you aware? I mean, I know you're aware, but I mean, what does that do to somebody like you? You're going into the Senate, and yet it does seem that it's a time of transition or upheaval where there has been all of this exposed. And the people of Arkansas we may be at a point where we're losing confidence in our elected officials to not enrich themselves, to not influence, peddle, and make extra money on the side. Do you have any ideas, or what are your thoughts on that, and how to make it better, sir?
Sure. Well, going back to your opening statement, the higher chamber is the chamber that's higher to God. And I think whichever chamber, and I'm saying this a little bit facetiously, but both chambers and the administrative branch, need to align with the principles of God, because if we were walking in step with the principles of God, we wouldn't have as much front page news as we've been having in the last year. Now, again, that's not to, present as holier than thou. It's, always mindful that by the grace of God, there go I, and let him without sin cast the first stone. The fact of the matter is, we've got an image problem, and that image problem has been created by some members of each party that has cast a dark shadow over the institution. And I think with regards to, what the Senate is doing by revisiting their rules, I think that's great. I think that's a good step of self-image improvement on the Senate end. But I'm more interested in initiating laws that come with things such as prison time and felony charges if you violate the law to the level that has been violated. And I know those things are there to a certain degree now, and some are going to experience that. But I think the effort to make things more transparent, more accountable, need to be in the letter of the law, not the rule book of the chamber. And that is, that's what I'm pushing for. Senator Mark Johnson, brand new senator coming in, that's a passion of his. There are several others. I've already refiled the legislation that I attempted to get through last time that I was unsuccessful. That I think if the events of last year were occurring 2 years ago, it would have been easier for me to get this piece of legislation through than I'm trying to now.
What would it have done? What would it have done, Kim?
It would require that if you, as a member of the legislative branch, run a piece of legislation and you represent, or you would personally gain from that, you would have to file a copy of that with the Secretary of State to become official document. And the whole intent of it is that if you didn't and it became known, then there would be, penalties of law, including, criminal charges. And the fact of the matter is, if somebody wants to do something wrong, if somebody has some ulterior motive, if somebody's going to try to slip something through, it doesn't really matter what law we've got on the book. That's a problem of the heart, not the problem of the law. And they're going to do it. So we just have to make sure that all the safeguards are in place and heighten that bar to hold them accountable, so that if they do it, they know they're all going to get caught, as we are seeing now. They're all going to get caught and put that fear back into their thought processes.
Yeah. Well, I still think there's some. I mean, I still think maybe there's more indictments to come, and I hope they all get caught. I hope we do have that justice. Just from a confidence standpoint, we're talking with State Representative Kim Hammer on a specific question about corruption and ethics reform. How do you handle this attorney problem, Kim? How do you handle allowing an attorney to still be a state representative or a state senator, but not allowing them to funnel money through their law practice for no actual legal services, but instead, representing, clients with bills and resolutions and things like that? I mean, how do you police something like that?
Well, I think the legislation I've got and the legislation that some others are looking at putting in, that I'm really not at liberty to talk about now, are going to help address that problem. And let me say, this is not an anti-lawyer bill. You could own a furniture warehouse. I work for a hospice. I could do something that would benefit, my hospice. It really goes back to what I said a while ago. It's a problem with the heart, and it's a problem with the moral fabric of the person who's doing the actions than it is sometimes the law. So, I think we need people from all walks of life in the chambers. However, I think all walks of life need to be treated equal when you're in the chamber, regardless of whatever your occupation is. If you're an attorney, I think you just have to weigh that out in your decision to run and let your clients know that, hey, I'm going to run. If it becomes a conflict of interest, I may not be able to represent you as far as, taking a retainer, or I certainly won't be able to take money while I run your piece of legislation. I think it becomes truly an ethics question that a person has to wrestle with.
Yeah.
And that applies to all walks, all occupations of life.
I think that's good. I think that's a really good idea. The goal is to make sure everybody is treated equally. All professions are treated equally. If you're a politician, State Representative Kim Hammer, I'd love to do this again. Good luck in your race, and if you can go ahead and give, there may be people out there listening that want to help with your campaign, want to make sure that a Republican goes in this particular seat and not the Democrat. Where could they find more information out from you?
We're developing the website, so it's out there just for reference point, but they can go for hammerforsenate.com. That's hammer like a tool, the number 4, senate.com.
All righty, hammerforsenate.com. Kim Hammer, we appreciate it, sir. You have a great morning.
Thanks for the interview. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Folks, we're going to take a break. This is Conduit News, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com.
This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment. From the beginning, authors of our Constitution, Bill of Rights, Declaration of Independence, and the Federalist Papers advocated the general election of people who possess wisdom, discernment, and loyalty to their constituents. Why? The people expect their representatives to uphold their promises. The representatives recognize the honor bestowed by these constituents. Advancement comes from their followers, not the government. Elections are frequent, and accountability is a compelling factor to loyalty and support from constituents. From a July 5th, 1929 speech by President Calvin Coolidge. This is Representative Dan Sullivan with the Liberty Moment.
Paid for by Sullivan for Arkansas. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
The FBI, because he's got this holier than thou, I know everything. And now he's quoting the Psalms and the Bible. Give me a break. You lied before Congress. Donald Trump didn't do anything until he fired you. He wasn't under investigation until he fired you. And you're a leaker. You've admitted you're a leaker. I mean, I can go on, but you got to get my book. Leakers, leakers, and liberals.
Yeah, and it's available now, folks. So we've thrown the Amazon page up on the screen for those of you who are watching as instead of listening. Now, 3 days. I'd love to get your opinion, Judge Janine, on the recent news here. 3 days before President Trump and President Putin were scheduled to meet in Helsinki, you had the announcement of the 12 Russians being indicted. Now, to me, it seemed that there were some trying to stop this diplomacy or attempt at diplomacy from ever happening. And if it was going to happen,
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Okay, man, I tell you, we've had it feels like a jam-packed show this morning where we started the program, if you missed anything, we started talking about how Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky asked President Donald Trump to revoke the security clearances, the security clearance of John Brennan, who has monetized, and this was in the tweet, monetized his security clearance to make money giving information to CNN. John Brennan goes on CNN after the Helsinki summit and calls President Trump treasonous, which is insane. Just by the very definition of the word, and it's of such a low bar for treason. And, I still stand by what I said last hour, that if you're the former director of the CIA and you think a press conference where Trump didn't say what you wanted him to say or said something that you didn't want him to say, whatever it is, and you think that rises to the level of treason from a press conference, you are incompetent, have a screw loose, or have a lot to lose. Sarah Huckabee Sanders yesterday was asked about the meeting between Senator Rand Paul and President Donald Trump, where she said that not only is President Trump considering revoking the security clearance of John Brennan, but also James Clapper, James Comey, Susan Rice, and I think one other guy from the Bush administration. And I may be leaving somebody out. But McCabe, yeah. And I think McCabe at least partially lost his security clearance when they fired him. So anyway, that was it's pretty big news there. Also, we have a tech CEO. A tech CEO has now come out and said that China is a huge cyber threat, that there's a Chinese cyber war that's going on, all the time. And we use that to add to our list of people that are saying that China, not Russia, but China is actually a bigger threat. The FBI Director Christopher Wray, an advisor for the CIA, came out last week and said all of this. And so we continued our discussion about Arkansas's Chief Economic Development Policy, which right now is taking our money and giving it to Chinese companies to incentivize them to come here, to use our resources to make China rich, to make these Chinese companies rich. So we had an in-depth discussion on that. And we're, again, asking the question, is this a good economic philosophy moving forward? I disagree with the winners and losers thing, yes. But if you're going to do it, if you're going to give taxpayer money to a company, do we need to be doing business with China, considering we're in a trade war, considering what they're doing in the South China Sea, considering comments of officials who've come on this program and have said, yeah, I mean, things are are pretty bad over there, that the CIA is saying they want to supplant the USA in the world. You have the FBI saying that they have investigations in all 50 states about the economic activity that leads back to Chinese companies. If that is the case, shouldn't we ask our Arkansas politicians, Governor Hutchinson most of all, if this is actually good for the national security interests? He used to work for Homeland Security. Is this good for the national security interests of the country now, and is it consistent with the Make America Great Again agenda? We'll see you tomorrow.